Hello and welcome. In this video I'm going to be doing only one thing. Restoring this one little antique screw. It comes from a 1938 vacuum cleaner. And as you can see, it's a little rusty. And the process begins by removing every speck of rust. I use a wire wheel on the bench grinder and just go to town. And yes, I do need to bolt down my bench grinder. Now the wire wheel has worked its magic on the rust, and even given the screw a little bit of a shine. But that's not good enough for me. I've only just begun. Here I have a small piece of a soft rubber hose that I'll use to protect the screw's threads. I've got the screw chucked into a drill, and I'll use the drill to spin the screw for the sanding. So much sanding. The starting sandpaper grit depends on the medium, just like everything else. In this case, we have a steel screw that had a fair amount of rust on the head. And it was a little more than just surface rust. It actually did eat down into the metal. And that's left the head of the screw sort of pockmarked and cratered. Kind of like the surface of the moon, except it's not made out of cheese or rocks that are actually space crabs. Because of this, we now have high spots and low spots, and while there are ways to fill the low spots, that's much too complicated for something this small and insignificant, really. So what we do is we sand down the high spots until we get the whole surface to be at the level of the low spots, which means the head of the screw is actually shrinking, but probably 1/1000th of an inch or so. I couldn't give you an exact measurement. But the goal with the first and maybe the second sanding is to get a uniform surface area and to take out as much of the imperfections as we can. The thing about polishing is that it's really just sanding in progressively finer grits. Each grit sanding away the marks of the grit before it, and you want the sanding grits to be close enough to each other that they're able to smooth out the scratches from the previous sandpaper. And eventually you get to such a high grit that the scratches it leaves are basically microscopic and not visible to the eye. At which point it will be a very smooth surface, and that's what we're after. When you get up to 2000 or 3000 grit, you're almost there, and it looks smooth and shiny. But it still has those little sanding marks where you can tell that it's been sanded, rotationally. It has little lines. That's why when you look at the reflections on it, they're sort of like very thin triangle, like wedge shapes, because all the little sanding lines reflect the light, even though you really can't see the sanding lines. But you can see how the light reflects off of them, and that gives it away, that characteristic shape. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. Finally done with all that sanding, now the next step is the actual quote-unquote polishing with polishing rouge. In this case, I'm going to start out with the red rouge right here, and this will start to take away some of those sanding marks and really finish the surface. Do you see what I mean about the sanding marks? How you can tell that it looks sort of brushed? Look at the reflections now, how they appear round instead of triangular. And now I'm moving on to the white rouge, so I'm changing the cotton wheel so that I don't cross-contaminate them. Clean the wheel and apply a little bit of rouge and go to town. And now, through the magic of me doing more than one of these, you can see a before and after. And you see again, this is what I was saying with how the reflections give away the sanding marks. And on the left side, you see the one that's been polished doesn't really have those sanding marks. It just looks like a smooth surface. And now we've come to the fun part, nickel plating. The first thing to do is to put the screw firmly on the end of a copper wire that'll be used as a hanger. The middle of the wire has insulation left on it, so the minimum amount of nickel gets wasted plating the hanger wire. And it goes into a hot degreaser bath. This is the nickel plating solution. I got it from Caswell Plating. And this is a little clock motor attached to a board with a little hook on it. And I use this to suspend the part in the plating bath, and it very slowly spins around so it makes sure it plates all sides of the part. These are 2 pure nickel strips. They will be our anodes, and I'm going to give them just a gentle sand to get any oxidation off of them. And then they go into the degreaser bath to make sure there's absolutely no oil on them. Everything gets a rinse before it goes in. And I connect the 2 anodes together, and then I hang them in the plating bath. This is a fish tank air stone hooked up to a little air pump. And I drop it in the bottom of the plating bath. And the reason is that the bubbles will rise up and knock off any bubbles forming on the part that's being plated. Because if a bubble forms on the part when it's being plated, it'll make a spot where it's not plated. Five minutes later. Ah, so satisfying. And again, through the magic of me doing more than one of these, you can see a before and after. And you really can tell the difference. The nickel is just a hint of yellow to it, and the bare steel is a little blue, actually. And also, the Caswell plating seems to have additives to allow it to fill, very small, probably microscopic imperfections, and it really brings out the luster to it. And we've come full circle on the before and afters. If you look closely at the reflection, you can actually see the back of my cell phone in its brown case recording this video. The polish is that good. And here it is, the old screw, all rusty. About 80 years old at this point. And what a stark difference. Really is a mirror shine to it. And hopefully it'll last another 80 years. Hey, if you liked this video, don't forget to like this video. Consider subscribing, and thanks for watching.